A cop threw hot coffee on my chest and called it order. My head hit a table hard enough to ring the room, and a gold badge rolled on the floor like a warning nobody wanted to hear. Phones came up. Voices went quiet, and I remember thinking, if I blink now, they will write my whole life for me. I didn't blink. It was a weekday afternoon in Atlanta, sun sliding across the glass at a Starbucks, and I was just a guy in a burgundy suit trying to finish notes from an internal file. Nothing dramatic, just numbers and names and a timeline that had to make sense. The cappuccino next to me still sending up a thin line of steam, the room humming with the regular noises of milk frothers and low conversation, and then the door chimed and in walked Kyle Donovan, uniform, crisp belt, full eyes like blades that already knew what they wanted to cut. He ordered a black coffee, leaned on the counter, and studied me like a price tag he didn't like. Laptop, nice suit, quiet, not ordering more, then drifted over and planted his shadow on my keyboard, said, "Papers like the word itself could shrink a person," and I asked if there was a problem. Calm voice, steady eyes, and he tapped the edge of my laptop with a knuckle. Said, "Illegal things happen on machines like that." Made sure everyone nearby heard enough to feel scared, but not enough to feel responsible, you know what I mean? Then he smiled, the kind of smile that tastes like old cigarettes, and told me out loud that in his neighborhood, the law was him. I told him he was confusing the law with his ego, closed my laptop so he would see I wasn't hiding anything, and he took that as a dare, spun the coffee once, then flung it, heat exploding across my shirt, the room gasping, my body stepping back on instinct, and his hand grabbed the back of my neck and bounced my head off the table so hard it went quiet, except for phones and a woman whispering, "Dear God." And as I caught my breath, something small slipped from my jacket, hit the tile with a soft clink, and rolled until the afternoon light caught it. A gold badge from the Federal Security Bureau. Not a toy, not a prop. My name stamped on the back, my work stamped on my ribs. Kyle picked it up, laughed, called it fake, tossed it so it rang against the floor again, and told the room nobody leaves, which is what men say when they want witnesses and no witnesses at the same time. I didn't swing, I didn't shout. I locked onto a steady place in my own chest and said he was destroying himself, and he called it discipline, and he said the quiet part out loud, that a gun and skin color settle things faster than facts. And yeah, that happened, and it still happens, and if you're already angry, I get it, but hold that feeling, because the thing about pressure is it builds slow, and then it breaks all at once. Handcuffs siren the door, the sidewalk red and blue, painting the glass like a carnival that lost its music. A chair knocked over a streak of blood drying at my temple, and he shoved me into the cruiser with one more line about how he is God in this zip code. And I looked at the phones and at the faces behind them, some held high, some pointed at the floor. And I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone tell this story without the parts that matter. The holding room smelled like old paper and mint gum, the kind that turns bitter after 2 minutes, and Kyle leaned on the metal table and did the thing he's probably done to 100 men. Talked like silence means guilt and rank means truth. And I let him talk, counted my breaths, watched the clock that loses a second every minute, and then boots came down the hallway, and a younger officer, voice tight, said, "A call just came from Washington about a detainee named Malik Turner." My rank and number read out, and the order was simple: release him now. And if you think I felt like fist pumping, I didn't, because sometimes the only thing a win gives you is a colder kind of clarity. He fumbled the keys, unlocked the cuffs without looking at me, told me I could go, like he was being generous, and I told him my silence wasn't surrender, it was a warning. Then walked out past a bulletin board full of posters about community trust that felt like jokes someone forgot to laugh at. By sundown, the video was everywhere. Shaky angle, bad sound, but the words came through, the splash came through, and people who never share anything shared it. Grandmothers in church threads, veterans clubs, neighbors, who usually just post pictures of grandkids. Older voices saying this again, really in 2025, and a lot of younger ones saying name him, fire him, fix it. And in between those two choirs is where most of the work lives. I didn't go home to sleep. I sat down with a civil rights attorney named Alicia Moore under fluorescent lights in a small rented office near a church, a stack of blank legal pads on one side, a box of tissues on the other, like she knew where a person might crack. And she didn't talk like a commercial. She talked like someone who sat at kitchen tables after funerals and said, "I can't promise easy, I can promise we push." And she drew 2 columns on a pad and said, "We're walking on 2 tracks at once. Civil action to lock the records in place, and a covert audit of every system they'll try to bleach. And we set rules so fear wouldn't write them for us, encrypt everything. No personal email, 3 separate offline backups, 1 sealed in her safe. one with a journalist who'd rather be right than first one in a place far from any copier that hums at night, and I laid out what I already had. Internal emails with those dead phrases like administrative check, camera outage reports that always happen at the worst time, access logs that didn't match the weather. And she took a long breath and said, chain of custody, or it didn't happen, and we started numbering everything like we were counting ribs. Retaliation, likes the side door, a wire in the back wheel, a spin out at the light on Peachtree, the taste of rubber in your teeth, me shaking on the curb while good people asked if I was okay. And the worst kind of envelope sat at my front step with a photo of my daughter at recess, her smile bright and a line on the back that said, she's next. And if you want to know what fear tastes like when it turns to steel. That was the moment I called Alicia from a burner. We moved my kid that same night, changed routines, cut off digital shadows, pulled the SIM, carried 2 routes everywhere, and I wrote down the protocols out loud so panic would not. A few nights later, the power at Alicia's office went out and 3 men in department jackets kicked the back door yelling inspection while they sprayed the routers and yanked hard drives, and one grabbed her by the throat until her eyes watered. And she still smiled this tiny sideways smile like she was telling a joke that took a long time to land and said you can burn paper but you can't burn the truth, and she wasn't being cute. We had already wired the place with battery-backed cameras and an automatic upload that sent copies to a federal server the instant the lights died. So when my team hit the alley door with a church security guard and a federal tech and a plainclothes agent who knew how to move, the men went face down. The evidence bags came out and the upload confirmation hit my phone, and I sat on the curb with my head in my hands until the shaking passed. The logs were uglier than the video. A deleted directory that wasn't random clusters that matched a unit called 19 on the deployment calendar, outages that hit at the exact minute the unit rolled, and a string of emails with phrases like clean execution, like somebody forgot what clean means, and a signature that kept repeating, Deputy Chief Ethan Donovan. And your gut drops in slow motion when a pattern inches toward power. You feel the floor tilt. You see the family name and you know the stubborn truth that this is not one man with a bad day. It's a machine that tells itself it's doing a job. Alicia said we go up, not sideways. Federal prosecutor emergency freeze warrants for servers not housed inside the same walls as the problem. And we looped in a forensic expert who explains hash values like he's talking to his aunt and still makes her feel smart, you know what I mean? And we promised each other no leaks until the warrants were live, because the only thing a system loves more than silence is time. While this moved, the city did what cities do when elders show up in numbers. They changed the tone for a few days. They said under review. They promised transparency with the clean font turned on. And the public said, we've heard that song, show us the sheet music, and the video kept traveling. Seniors with signs, kids with mic flags, union folks on lunch break, people who don't like protests saying they understood this one, which is how a wall starts to crack, not from one punch, but from pressure that doesn't take a day off. Then the twist inside the twist. A recorded call from inside the State House voices arguing softly that the problem is not the machine, it's a single gear named Kyle. And if they give the public that gear, the noise will die down. And when Alicia played the clip, we both knew we were holding something heavy and sharp, not just for headlines, but for court. So we authenticated it, hashed it, printed the transcript, sealed it, and waited for the judge's signature. So when it hit the light, it wouldn't just sing, it would bite. The hearing room filled like a church on Sunday. Camera rigs, nameplates, people in clothes they saved for good news. And when the prosecutor said, play, Exhibit A, the cafe appeared on the screen, the cup, the crack, the clink, the words and the subtitles so nobody could pretend they misheard. And you could feel the room go from anger to something colder, a kind of collective memory turning over in its sleep. The defense tried all the notes, stress split-second training a few bad actors, and then they went at the chain of custody, and Alicia smiled like she had been waiting for that, and laid out hashes and seals and logs and off-site vault receipts, and the forensic expert explained timestamps like he was reading a recipe, and it all sounded boring in the way truth sometimes does when it is aluminum and time, and the jury listened like people who've bought their own tires and know how to spot a pattern of nails. My turn, and I didn't give a speech. I told them about heat and copper and breath and my kid's science fair project about pressure. How pressure is quiet until it's not, and the judge told me to stick to facts, and I did. And the prosecutor showed a chart that looked like a family tree of blame that finally led to the right branches, and the retired sergeant from Internal Affairs, who had always believed in the job more than the building, drew the chain of command for Unit 19 and said the emails weren't mistakes, they were habits. While this moved in the open, something else moved in the dark. An explosion tore through the police records annex at midnight. Char and smoke, a lot of water, a lot of excuses, TV saying preliminary cause, and the public saying we know what fire looks like when it's scared. And the next morning I held a scorched shard of a license plate that popped loose from a black sedan outside the scene, and for a second I saw a face behind the glass. Square jaw, practiced smile. A man who had supposedly stepped away from politics. And maybe it was him, maybe it was a reflection. But the shard was real, and we bagged it and sent it to a lab that never takes city contracts. And I kept the anger from boiling because boiling burns off too fast. In the end, the jury didn't take long. Conspiracy, civil rights violations, destruction of public records. And the judge read numbers that stacked into 25 years for the top of Unit 19, including Ethan Lesser time for the captains who wrote lullabies for lies, restitution, and a monitor who doesn't answer to the department. And the gavel sounded like a door being shut with both hands, and people clapped once and stopped when the judge gave them the look, then filed out into a hallway that smelled like old wood and relief. I went back to the same Starbucks a week later because stubbornness is a kind of healing. Ordered a cappuccino, sat by the window, and the owner had put up a brass plaque. Every voice silenced will be echoed by another. A little grand for a place that sells croissants, but sometimes grand is earned, and a kid in a backpack pressed his hand to the glass like he was touching the beginning of something, and I bought him a hot chocolate and told him sit anywhere he wants. And the barista said, "Thank you for not giving up." And I told her, "A lot of people got us here, and the best way to honor them is not to make this place a museum." I'd love to give you a clean ending tied with a bow. Bad guy punished, system fixed, fade out. But my daughter still watches me lock the door. Twice appeals are coming like winter. The monitor has teeth, but teeth are only useful if you keep biting. And somewhere there's a man in a suit rehearsing a line about order that will sound very calm on TV. And that's why we keep the lantern on, keep the backups humming, keep the chain of custody like a heartbeat. Because justice is not a fireworks show, it's a rhythm you learn to keep. Your hands, your feet, your voice, steady, steady, steady. You can call this a story about a cop in a cafe, but to me it's a story about all the small yeses that beat the big no. The woman who pressed record even when her hand shook, the elder who stood outside City Hall for an hour because standing matters, the tech who stayed up past midnight to verify a hash, because boring work is what keeps truth from dissolving, the attorney who kept her humor while a hand was on her throat because fear hates people who can still smile, and the jurors who believe their eyes. So tell me, what do you see here? One rogue officer or a machine that runs on silence? When you hear under review, do you hear accountability or stall? If phones were banned in that cafe, would any of this have reached a courtroom? And if you were at that window, would you look down at your cup or look up and hit record? Drop your city in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you've seen, where you live. Argue with me about right and wrong and what justice should look like tomorrow. Share this. If you believe sunlight should be a policy and not a panic button, and subscribe if you want more people to learn the rhythm, because pressure builds and then it breaks. And when it breaks, the room doesn't forget the people who kept time.